So Professor John, this is
Yeah.
a global digest think tank group. We are doing public advocacy around the world. We talk with different scholar, professor, expert from India, from China, from Asian countries, from Europe, America, and you are the one professor from Australia. I have opportunity to talk with you, and we are discussing geopolitics and current conflict crisis in the world, and especially we uh, Asia Pacific region. Australia is part of Asia Pacific region. We are in
Yeah.
one region, so Australia should more active than any other country in the regional issue. And you may
Yeah.
also know current military coup in Burma. It has been over a year, but our region is so inactive and nobody pay attention much. It's been, much the crisis will disappear in the many social media and mainstream media in the world compared to Ukraine. Ukraine crisis just in this year, but a lot of Western country and a lot of the international society support them, pay attention them. Of course, Ukraine crisis is also very big issue and very, it is a concern for the whole world. That's definitely. But we should not, it doesn't mean we should not forget about Burmese coup, Burmese crisis. Burmese crisis, people die, more than Ukraine crisis, in terms of number. Absolutely crisis. This is a competition between military dictatorship and liberal democracy. So these two competition, the dictator authoritarian took over power by gun at the gunpoint, even though the whole Burmese population, uh, they already they show their consent for democratic government nationwide. The people protest. We don't accept the military regime. We accept a democracy. Even Burmese population, overwhelming majority, they express about democracy. But it is not about legitimacy or not legitimacy in Burma. It's more about who has a gun, who has power, who. It's not about legitimacy of democracy or not in Burma. It's about if you have gun, whatever, we don't care, like the military behavior. So that's why Burmese people are protesting. But why uh, the whole international society are silence, especially liberal democratic country? Why they are so silent on this Burmese issue? So, Professor John, can you share us our audience, and please introduce briefly about yourself to our audience. Please, Professor John.
Yes. So, John, thank you for having me on the program. I'm a Professor of International Security and Intelligence Studies in the Strategic and Defence Studies Centre in the Coral Bell School of Asia-Pacific Affairs at the Australian National University. I'm a former military officer, and over a decade ago, I was Australia's Defence Attaché to Myanmar, based in Bangkok, but regularly and routinely visiting Myanmar and accompanying the Australian ambassador on her trips from Yangon to Naypyidaw for meetings with the president and with ministers from various government
When
agencies.
it was, Professor John?
That was 2008 to 2010.
10 years ago.
I concluded in December 2010. So I was there for the period of Cyclone Nargis and for the early signs of democratization, a lot of skepticism initially about what their Tatmadaw plans were, what Than Shui's plans were, and what Min Aung Hlaing would do. And I, early on in my time, after I left the military and I joined academia, I became an academic at the ANU. And one of the earlier pieces I wrote was about the utility of engaging with the Tatmadaw to induce a more humane approach to the use of force in line with international humanitarian law and with the internationally recognized laws of armed conflict. This was something that was well received at the time. There was a roadmap to democracy people talked about. There was an optimism about reform. I was hoping initially that that kind of military to military engagement would have a constructive effect on the culture of the Tatmadaw, of the Myanmar military.
Professor John, maybe you have been directly in touch with the head of military, Min Aung Hlaing, and all his colleagues at the time you were in Burma under embassy. Have you ever indirectly talk or any meeting with them? How did you experience?
That's right. So I accompanied the Australian ambassador, who was taking the lead in passing some key messages from the Australian government to the government in Myanmar, in Yangon, in Naypyidaw, about Australia's concerns and aspirations, both for the constructive democratization of Myanmar, the inclusion of Myanmar in the community of nations, of constructive engagement with Australia and ASEAN and Myanmar as an ASEAN member state, and on the prospect of improving bilateral relations as well. Very mindful of human rights concerns. At that stage, we were advocating for the release of Daw Aung San Suu Kyi and for other reforms as well. So after that, incredible reform appeared. People were optimistic about a roadmap to democracy. What we realize now is that it wasn't a roadmap, it was a dead end. It was a cul-de-sac. It was a U-turn. And so while I advocated for closer military to military engagement in the past, I now see that that was, despite good intentions, ineffective, and it did not have the desired effect, did not have the desired result. So as we think about the situation now, though, and since the coup, the Min Aung Hlaing's coup against the democratically elected People's Government of Myanmar, the Australian government successively, under the previous Prime Minister and the current Prime Minister, have taken a pretty strong line in support of the National Unity Government representatives, in support of a position within ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, that tries to call Min Aung Hlaing and the Tatmadaw to account. Now, we have been one of the most vocal advocates. We, Australia, have been amongst the most vocal advocates of that, alongside countries like Indonesia. Retno Marsudi, the foreign minister, has been very active in that capacity. Malaysia has also, and we have advocated for countries like Thailand, neighbouring Thailand, which has close relations with the Tatmadaw with the Prime Minister of Thailand having close relations with Min Aung Hlaing as well, Prayut Chan-o-cha.
Right.
And so, Australia has valued its relations with Thailand, and we have been arguing that Thailand has a constructive role to play to try and persuade the Min Aung Hlaing and the military to change their way. And now, so when you think about the situation today in Myanmar, it's such a tragedy. In the contrast with Ukraine is an interesting one, because while there's no external power that's invaded Myanmar this time, effectively the Tatmadaw is the external force of, a military invading kind of force. It's overturned the legitimate democratic rights and expression of the will of the people of Myanmar,
Right.
And generated an enormous backlash across the country, across not just the armed separatist groups along the borders to the west, to the north, to the east and the southeast, but also increasingly, as you know well, John, amongst the Burman people.
Right.
In the
every city, every towns,
yeah,
it's against protest against military. Yes, right.
So where do we go from here? The comparison with Ukraine, it's worth just reflecting on that a little bit longer, because Ukraine sits between Russia and Europe, and it's a position that is geographically different, very different to Myanmar, which sits between India, Bangladesh to the west, China to the north, Thailand to the east. China, as we know, has been supportive of the Tatmadaw, eager to maintain its access to the oil and gas pipeline linked to Chaopu from Yunnan, from Kunming, and pursue its economic interests in Myanmar. India has been reluctant to get too involved in a situation that would see potentially India confront China directly in that space. Thailand on the east has been reluctant to be involved as well. That means that there's the National Unity Government, the People's Defence Forces of Myanmar, do not have a directly neighbouring support base country. There's no Poland next to.
No full-fledged support by any neighbor country.
No full-fledged support by any of the direct neighbouring support countries. So, and as a historian and as somebody who's looked at insurgencies in history in the 20th century and early 21st century, insurgencies are most effective when they have a neighbouring country offering a support base.
Right.
Now, that to a certain extent, Thailand, Bangladesh, India offer safe havens for people fleeing Myanmar, but not really a support base for counterattacks into the country. And that's a very big difference.
Not clear spot anything. They don't spot anything properly. And they don't absolutely not against too. They still voice democracy, but there are no support are not coming.
Yeah. So the key to my mind is advocacy for greater engagement in support of the national unity government from ASEAN, the ASEAN member states, and from India and Bangladesh, especially. You can't expect China to play, although there is, I think, a reasonable prospect of engaging China to at least exercise restraint, to not further support Min Aung Hlaing and the Tatmadaw, the Burmese military. And of course, the other element in the mix is, as you know well, John, is that Russia has been a long-standing supporter of the Tatmadaw as well. Right. Much of the equipment, many of the helicopters, Russian supplied items of equipment, the MiG jets, a lot of the equipment is Russian sourced, and Russia obviously remains eager to keep close ties with the Tatmadaw. I think on the premise that were they to stop supporting the Tatmadaw, that a national unity government would look unfavorably on Russia's support for the Tatmadaw so far. So where does that leave us now? That's where the advocacy now on Australian television in the last 24 hours has been a very powerful and evocative documentary on the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, ABC Television, about the situation in Myanmar. I think there is a lot of advocacy work to be done in the ASEAN member
Maybe
countries.
more Australian people might aware about Burma right now.
Yeah. So Myanmar and Australia, we have quite a lot of history going back at least to the Second World War. Now, Australia obviously back then was part of the British Empire, so was Myanmar. And we ended up on two fronts. We ended up having Australians alongside Canadians and Indians and others fighting, particularly in the Air Force, in support of the campaign in Myanmar, but obviously a lot of prisoners of war who built the railway between Thailand and Myanmar, Burma.
I see.
The Thai-Burma Railway. And there's, in fact, I've been to commemorative dawn services, the Anzac Day services at the Commonwealth War Grave in Yangon to lay wreaths and commemorate the memory of the lives of those Australians and Commonwealth country soldiers who died fighting and
Right.
and as prisoners of war in Myanmar as well. But after the Second World War, also we tried to engage constructively with the government of Myanmar, of Burma as it was then, and with the Burmese road to socialism in the 1960s, we were effectively asked to leave. We were no longer welcome. And so there's been a long period from then on that Australia's engagement has been largely unwelcome in terms because of the issues that Australia brings up about human rights, about equality, about democracy, about justice, equity, these kinds of issues that the Tatmadaw has never been comfortable.
Right, because Burmese socialist government and military governments, they have a closed door policy. They never open up. That is understandable. Australia cannot engage. Most Western countries cannot engage in Burma in the past 50, 60 years. That's right. It is a Burmese regime policy. That is the problem of the policy and the structure of Burmese regime, right?
So under Ne Win, especially, the policy almost autarkic led to led to Myanmar, Burma then, kind of degenerating into this rusty, old, decrepit, crumbling state with very little development and poverty, very terrible
It's
health.
wrong system, he doesn't have any proper policy, even socialism. His socialism is not international standard socialism compared to Russia or China. Or Burmese may win socialism is nowhere in other part of the world except for Burmese, which means he doesn't have any standard with international system, even in socialism. He just doing something. He just pull some socialism system, and he just don't. He neglect something. He accept something. So it is totally, mash up the system. The new win. There is no any proper system.
So when there were signs of the roadmap to democracy, Australia and many other countries were optimistic about the opportunities this would present to engage, to welcome Burma, Myanmar into the community of nations, to contribute. And it was in that optimistic spirit that I wrote in 2012, advocating for engagement with the Tatmadaw in order to help bring them into, a more ordered social circle, if you like.
Expecting to full compliance or full, it should be, later full democracy expectation which started. That's true. That's your point.
So, but it became evident by 2014, 2015, it was pretty clear that the Tatmadaw was going no further. They had no intentions of going any further down that road. As I say, it was a cul-de-sac. It was a cul-de-sac, not a highway. And they got to the end of the cul-de-sac and they turned around.
It was democracy was never consolidated in Burma. During Tatmadaw, Thein Sein government, the first democratic government after 2011. And even he was spreading the whole world whenever he visits to Europe or other country. He say several times, we won't, you can't back to the military regime. He repeatedly say many times. But, now it is absolutely euthanasia. So that is a paradox in Burmese policy and the way they are leading the country by the military regime. Absolutely is, well.
So there's sadly too few people understand and care enough about Myanmar to do much about it. And ASEAN, the 9 other member states of ASEAN that have a real interest in making ASEAN work, are the ones, I believe, that perhaps could be persuaded to come to apply pressure on the Tatmadaw to perhaps swap recognition for the National Unity Government and to exert pressure on the Tatmadaw to recant, to rescind their campaign, to return to the barracks and to allow democracy to rule. Now, that is perhaps unduly optimistic, mindful of what we see in neighbouring Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, the other predominantly Theravada Buddhist mainland Southeast Asian nations. Even further afield, Vietnam, a communist one-party state, but with market reforms and an association with the United States and Australia. That is, there's a bit of an irony there that this communist country of Vietnam has become so closely associated with Australia and the United States, but it has a reluctance to upset the apple cart over politics in Myanmar. So the best hope lies in countries like Indonesia and Malaysia, but also now, and to a certain extent, Singapore. But Singapore is a very small state, a nervous state, because it's got large neighbours that it needs to be respectful of. The other big hope, perhaps, is with Bongbong Marcos in the Philippines, for whom there is an opportunity for a fresh approach to emerge in terms of how Myanmar is addressed from a Philippines foreign policy perspective. Because like with Indonesia and the other countries in ASEAN, it's not in their interests for ASEAN to unravel. It's actually in the interests of the Philippines and Indonesia and others to make sure that ASEAN functions well, that it remains the platform around which centrality remains. And that is, I think, perhaps the strongest argument from a purely self-interest point of view for the member states of ASEAN to be persuaded to agitate more forcefully and more persistently for a change in the arrangements over the management of Myanmar and its inclusion in ASEAN. So, these are easy things for me to say, much more difficult things to do.
Right.
But to be fair, I think the new Australian Foreign Minister Penny Wong is quite acutely aware of these issues and engaged in seeking to make them work and seeking to make progress on these issues.
But as Professor John, you point out very well, you know very detailed about Burmese issue. So first thing, as Australia policy, a kind of military to military engagement, I think you have been doing for the past 10 years, but now that is failed, right? Military to military war, because Burmese military regime may absolutely they may not cooperate.
It was never
engagement.
Yeah, it was never going to work on its own. It would only ever work if it was one strand amongst a number of strands of constructive engagement with government bodies and government culture in Myanmar. And clearly we've all failed on that front.
Right. So you have experience, you already said. So that is not working. And the other thing you point out about ASEAN Central engagement and ASEAN centrality engagement. But I'm very doubt ASEAN centrality, because ASEAN itself is not proper, club. They don't have proper club, not like European Union, They are just like a kind of a tea meeting table.
Yeah.
Nothing more than that.
So I'm more optimistic about ASEAN than that. But there's another aspect we haven't talked about yet, and that is the role of other countries, particularly Korea and Japan. Korea and Japan have been heavily invested in Myanmar, even under the pre-democracy period. They were quite heavily engaged. And of course, in the last 10 years, Korea and Japan have really invested considerably in Myanmar. And another country we haven't talked about is the United States. So these countries all have some agency, some opportunity for constructively engaging with Myanmar, with the National Unity Government, and with the Tatmadaw, and with the other ASEAN 9. And I think for the National Unity Government, as it seeks to reach out, there's an opportunity here, I think, to engage with Korea, particularly with the new Yoon administration and the Kishida government in Japan, and with the Biden administration, alongside perhaps with, US treaty ally Thailand, and Quad member India, and other countries like Australia, to look to creatively think about how we support the PDFs, the National Unity Government, apply more pressure on the Tatmadaw, while also applying pressure on China and Russia to desist, to no longer provide the Tatmadaw with the support they've provided. So for that to happen, there has to be something in it for China and Russia. So I think what we'd have to say is there would have to be a mechanism whereby China's interests are respected and Russia's investments are respected. This is, in terms of realpolitik, to make something potentially work, you've got to get Russia and China willing to restrain themselves, to allow a change to happen inside Myanmar. And hopefully with a UN mandate, a UN mandated body, a bit like what happened in East Timor, perhaps, or what happened in Cambodia in 1993-94 with the UN Transitional Authority of Cambodia. So I think there is some space, some hope for a international consortium to develop that conceivably could see these other countries have their interests protected, to allow space for a international mandate for a peace solution to emerge in Myanmar. That is probably, that's at the most optimistic end of the spectrum, but short of that, there are a lot of other far less happy scenarios, which John, you know very well.
Very good, Professor John. You point out, you explained very detailed. You did a lot of point. Definitely, as I've been discussing many experts and scholars in my previous Zoom, you may see our discussion. We always critique, and as in political science, as if you are a scholar, if you are a political scientist, there is always a way, to solve the problem. So Burmese case is very much complicated, political complicated, ideology complicated, but there is a way to solve. Yeah, there should be a way. We have to find out that, but not just, we cannot just rely on just a traditional method or something. There should be more method. We have to find out. There is a way to solve the problem. Definitely.
So I think they're probably, as I say, the key point to my mind is making it clear that the interests of these parties, China, Russia, India, ASEAN, their interests are aligned with the interests of peace and security, which are more aligned with the National Unity Government than they are with the Tatmadaw. And finding a mechanism, a formula that will secure allay the concerns of the Russia-China interests and allay the fears of neighboring Bangladesh, India, and Thailand, etc. May well work. The key to that is that the PDFs and the NUG need to continue to apply pressure on the Tatmadaw.
I agree. You're pointing out many times about NUG. Definitely, NUG must reform or remake a very fit organization for Burmese problem solution. I agree with you. We need to reform and refit NUG, not just pulling anybody in the organization and just we are not showcase. We should work. We should do something to happen, to change in Burma. I agree very much. We have to change it. We have to.
So for that to happen, there really needs to, the NUG needs to demonstrate an inclusiveness, and I think that's starting to show a more democratic inclusiveness, particularly for minorities, including, the less popular, but the Rohingya as well. For international acceptance,
That's right.
for international support, for international recognition and provision of not just morale support, but financial and other support.
Practical things,
These things are critical.
They should able to do practical things. I agree. You point out there should be inclusive of many ethnic groups. In my point, there are more important thing is the merit and the policy ideology of the organization. If they have clear ideology or clear direction in line with international society interests. Otherwise, nobody will interest. Why Australia is supposed to have NUG or Burma? What made them to help? Why Europeans should help them? Why Americans should help them? That's why I've been talking with many scholars and experts. Also, I write a letter to Australia Prime Minister. What is our interest, ideology, and our purpose, and what can be benefit for Australia and international society? What can Australia benefit? Also, I wrote a letter to Indian Prime Minister.
Excellent.
India should play active role. How
John,
it benefit for India as well.
I wish the people of Myanmar well, and if there's anything else I can do to help, please let me know.
Sure.
But those letters are important. Can I just say one thing?
Yes.
I meant to say before. When we think about the prospects of the likely trajectory of military conflict inside Myanmar today, we have to be mindful of how you can support and sustain a campaign against the Tatmadaw when they are backed by Russia and China, and when the command structure of the capital in Naypyidaw especially is designed to make it very, very difficult for the people to rise up against the military. One of the things I did when I was attaché was drove all around Naypyidaw, military precinct and the political precinct, the commercial precinct, the diplomatic precincts. It's deliberately very, very spread out. The military is deliberately in a dominant position.
Right.
And deliberately spread out and built in physically into Naypyidaw in a way that is very difficult to unseat, to remove from office.
Right.
So for the PDF, for the People's Defence Forces and the National Unity Government to have an effect, there would be a requirement to significantly change the resolve of the military, to undermine further the morale, and to work more rigorously to reduce the supply of weapons and ammunition to the military, and to bolster the prospects of the PDFs being able to stand their ground and actually push back to the Tatmadaw and their attacks. These are very, very complicated issues.
Right.
So while I think the pressure that the PDFs and the NUG are applying to the Tatmadaw and to Min Aung Hlaing's regime, the need for external support is great, and so you know, beyond what Australia's done, beyond what has been done so far, there is, I think, a need to demonstrate to the key players that their interests are best served by supporting the National Unity Government. And that means that the National Unity Government has to demonstrate that it is a representative body that will be sufficiently politically palatable for the other neighbours, for the other potentially supporting countries, to provide backing to enable them to win. Now, that's what has been amazing is how the people of Myanmar have risen up in opposition. And there have been a number of journalists, Anthony Davis being amongst them, who have articulated well how bravely and how resourcefully the people of Myanmar have sought to push back against the violent atrocities of the Tatmadaw. That, I think, needs to continue. There's multi-pronged approaches required,
right,
for there to be hope of success.
Sure. Professor John, you point out very clearly, and as again about NUG, you point out, I agree, we need to reform and refit the NUG very much, because NUG is not to be a kind of collection of all kind of people want to be on the stage. It's not like that. It should be the one able to, they should show, they should walk, walk. They should able to walk. It's not because of, it's not just not because of you want to do as you should be in the organization. It's not like that. It should be someone who, as I mentioned before, we have to think about merit issue, merit.
Yeah.
Who has logistic, ideology, strategy, able to supply and able to help the organization, able to engage with international society and rebuild the nation. Nation building. I've been several times pointing out in our Zoom, the first discussion in our podcast. It's about nation building. We have to bring someone who has able to build the nation.
So can I just on that point, John, it's instructive and helpful, I think, to consider the example of East Timor, Timor-Leste, and the work of people like José Ramos Horta, who, while East Timor was being ruled by Indonesia, he was advocating at the UN, internationally, for support for the Timorese people. Which the earlier Indonesian Foreign Minister Ali Alatas called the pebble in the shoe, the irritant of the relationship with Indonesia and other countries, particularly Australia, but the US as well. It strikes me that what Myanmar and the NUG could really benefit from is a international roving envoy, someone with the gravitas and international credentials of a Thant Myint U, or someone like that, U Thant's relative, who
I don't know.
perhaps.
I don't know much about him.
So he is a very articulate historian and writer about
Yes,
Myanmar.
I heard he is good in his story.
Yeah. So it strikes me that engaging with people like him, this is going to be a challenge for the NUG to go beyond their comfort zone, their known familiar tracks. But Thant Myint Oo is a very well respected, people of his ilk. There aren't too many of them who have history in Myanmar, who are internationally connected, who are well regarded, and who have a presence that can perhaps be capitalized upon for the benefit of the NUG and the people of Myanmar.
Yes, last time we've been discussing this kind of architect nation building issue in our podcast. Many people argue many candidates who can be the leader and who is the best appropriate for this movement. There are many scenarios we are discussing in our podcast.
Yeah.
I've been telling some people said based on the popularity, we should bring some popularity to be a leader, or at last, in my conclusion, in Burmese issue, we need more about strategy. Who was here in strategic and logistic, not about popularity in that moment, because we are still in the revolution. We don't not much useful about popularity in this moment. I mean, I'm not saying I'm not against. It's not important. It's very good, important, but we are in need of more strategic and logistic to practically able to engage and solve the problem. That
so
is
he's written. Thant Myint Oo has written a couple of quite powerful books that have, for me, have been they really, I thought, captured some of the essence of the issues. One was the River of Lost Footsteps, the history of Burma, and the other one was Where China Meets India. These are two quite insightful books that reflect a mind and a person who, to my mind, has a lot to.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. So, I don't know him personally, but I've heard him speak, and I've read his work, and it is evocative and powerful. And as I say, someone of that ilk, particularly as Daw Aung San Suu Kyi is imprisoned and is probably, she's not getting any younger, is and vulnerable to the fact that she is incarcerated. She's been constrained by the Tatmadaw. An advocate for Myanmar, for NUG, and for the people of Myanmar is really, they need to stand up, and perhaps that he could be tapped on the shoulder.
Suu Kyi is the best bet for Burma. We've been discussing in the previous time, but the problem why Suu Kyi failed also, that is the thing. She did not foresee, or she did not aware about logistic and strategy. Why she rely or trusted so much military?
Well, I find that really understandable. I'm actually quite sympathetic.
I've been critiqued many times. Why she did not prepare? She did not prepare when she was in power. She should know. She should foresee that how the military behavior, it will happen like that. But even her popularity, but eventually even she got kicked out. That is
but she was in a very difficult position. She was in a very difficult position.
That's the case in Burma. That's why we've been discussing. I argue some people say somebody like the Ban Ki-moon in Korea may be good to engage with the military. So we've been discussing many popularity guy, but
Yeah.
I I comment in case of Burma, we need more like military intelligence who are really logistic and strategic skill to do practical thing. I mean,
Yeah.
popularity is good, but Burmese in this moment we need is the like military intelligence. That is my point of view. So the
No, I
ability
don't
in
know that you
Burmese is
want.
like that.
I don't know. Not sure I agree, John. I don't know that you want another Kin Yunt. You know, the former
Maybe
military intelligence chief who had a reputation in Myanmar 20 years ago. You know, I don't know that that's what you want. I think
no.
you
I
want.
mean not Burmese military intelligence. I mean international society intelligence, U.S. military intelligence, or some
Yeah.
British, Australia, French intelligence. Somebody from liberal democracy country. Then they can able to engage more practical things, logistics, strategic, who are skilled in that field. I mean
Look,
that
I
will be
think
more
I think it has to be
useful.
I think it has to be somebody from Myanmar, to be honest, mate. I really think you
I
don't
mean,
want.
external side, from external side, I mean, we need somebody who are from military intelligence background. They can do practical things, strategic thing. But inside Burma also, we still need logistic and strategic skill, like political science.
Yeah.
Right now, Burmese what we need, whoever want to be a leader, without knowing international politics, it won't go anywhere.
Yeah.
That is reality. Because why Australia has to help Burma, why Americans should help Burma, why Europeans should help Burma. We should know, Burmese leaders should know what their interest, what the system, international system can work for solving Burmese issue. We cannot just shouting and just calling help. Nobody will come.
So
Already over 1 year, nobody are coming. That's why we've been talking also last time, weapon issue. So, well, Australia will deliver weapon to the anyone like left wing or uh, uh, who are not really clear about liberal democracy or who doesn't really know ideology. Because if they deliver the weapon might use for, against liberal democracy, it will be
mm,
terrible. So,
mm,
many, ethnic group in the Chinese Burma border and many places, there are many left-wing groups. They may not interest at all about democracy. Well, US will deliver weapon when European will deliver weapon to them. So we have to classify out who are uh, the background of liberal democracy, who can guide or give direction that were made according to international democratic society.
yeah.
That is uh, not just necessary. That is the issue about international society. Nobody want to deliver. That's why it's over 1 year. Nobody want to deliver weapon. They
So
don't trust. They don't trust. They don't know who they are.
so part of the
Who are
issue.
NGO? Who are NUG? Who
Yeah,
are
yeah,
PDF? Who are
yeah.
ethnic armed group? They don't know. Why should they deliver? That's why
So
that is the big issue I've been arguing Burmese leader. Uh, we have many leaders, but it doesn't mean it will be made according to international system. We should know political science, international politics. Then we have to work with them. Uh, Especially, my point is, my group in my podcast, we are emphasizing several times about liberal democracy. I'm pointing out many times liberal democracy. That is
I agree, John.
my point.
Liberal democracy is key, but you also need unity and leadership.
That is again, the ideology and policy is the one. If you don't clear, we cannot go any step. Yeah. And then next step, we have to be unity. We need to rebuild among our country, and we have to fit those many other steps we have to do. But fasting, we still not clear. NUG doesn't clear the first point, and PDF doesn't clear. That's why I point out, who will trust you? Who are NUG? Yeah. Who are PDF? Yeah. That's why I told them it is very risky. We cannot just shouting and asking help from international society. We can't do like that. Fasting, we have to change. We have to change within ourselves, our ideology, our direction. If we are clear ideology and direction, we can work in line with international society. That is my point. That's why I telling many times liberal democracy.
So liberal democracy is, I'm a big fan. It's clearly there are some countries around your neighborhood who are not so supportive. It's problematic. What you need, though,
that's right.
I think what you need is some reasonably charismatic leadership. You need somebody who can pull together the national unity government to be inclusive, to speak to a set of goals.
I agree.
That will speak to...
We must change. We must change.
That will speak to the interests, that will address the interests of the neighboring great powers, that will elicit the support of the international community, and that will capitalize on the blood, sweat, and tears of the PDFs and the people of Myanmar who've been standing up against the Tatmadaw for the last year. And as I say, I think, the NUG needs to look beyond themselves.
That's right.
For someone like a Janana Gusmao or a Jose Ramos Horta from Indonesia, from East Timor, Timor-Leste, who can be a charismatic leader to support the ambitions of Daw Aung San Suu Kyi, but not dependent on her because she can't do much in her difficult circumstances. With you.
By the way, East Timor case, because East Timor is, they have a good chances. East Timor is a overwhelmingly Christian society, so there is no problem with ideology complicated. So that is one thing. It's different from Burma. Burma's case is we have too much ideology complicated, and as I point out, there are many people. I'm not blaming PDF or NUG or any arms group. They against military. That is a good point, but there are many people in the middle. They don't really know what is a left wing, right wing, democracy, or socialism. That we need somebody like us who clearly know political science, liberal democracy.
Well, that's why I say
can provide assistance, guide them, and that's the thing that we need to work with international society. One thing about labor. One thing about yes.
Let me just say one more thing. Yes. Just about someone like Tan Nyuntu is, I think, somebody who has gravitas internationally. But what you need also is somebody who is going to speak to the multicultural, multi-religious, multi-linguistic, multi-ethnic nature of Myanmar.
That's true.
And will actually further inspire the people of Myanmar to pull together despite their differences. And look, countries like Australia, it's a very multicultural country now. The United States, Canada, and other countries like that are actually pretty relatively quite successful at being inclusive and not being exclusive. And I think the challenge for Myanmar today and into the future is to find a model that is inclusive and that it inspires the people from across the lands of Myanmar to share one common cause.
Definitely. I
and
agree
that's the challenge.
I agree with you very much. So actually, a kind of the point is the backbone. You know, who will be the backbone? That's the thing. So now that's why, Professor John, I'm developing those kind of platform of strategy. You know, I mean, let them everybody do whatever they can do, but I have to develop the backbone, something that should not be fall down in a few steps or after some time. So that's the thing. And about neighbor issue, let me tell only the last issue. About neighbor issue, you know, there's hope left, not much hopeful for ASEAN, as you know. But I hope very much India. India is basically democracy, you know. There is no way Indian society can they depart away from democracy. That's why one of the neighbor backbone democracy is India is reliable. Even they are not yet liberal democracy, but they will never, they were left away from democracy. So that's the thing. In that connection, India, Australia, Japan, US, Quad is the best way to approach in this region, even solving Burmese issue. ASEAN can involve, but in terms of, I trust liberal democracy in Australia, in America. Japan is so, even they are not yet fulfilled, but they are almost in a way to liberal democracy. And India is also, they are consolidated democracy, you know. Japan also consolidated democracy. So I trust this is sufficient to play in this regional issue, logistic issue. ASEAN can involve, but don't be centralized. That is not much helpful for a long time for liberal democracy in Burma, because India is very big neighbor for Burma too. India is one of big powerful. It can play, and Australia can play very well. Australia is one of the strongest liberal democracy in Asia Pacific region. So I hope we can work together with Australia. Australia should play a big role.
So you made an excellent suggestion there, John. A new role, a new mission for the Quad.
Definitely, it should do it, because there is no option in ASEAN. There is no option. I mean, other Asian countries no hopeful. There's only hopeful cooperation between India, Australia, Japan. You know, and that can still change because we have sufficient internal factor. You know, it's about the people in the country. So we already know the statistics. Overall, Burmese one democracy. If we still have to guide them on the way to liberal democracy, but at least they want democracy. So Russia, China, even they support the military junta. Demographically, they don't have any resource the military regime can get it. But we, the whole 90% population, we can easily change the regime. But why international, especially liberal democracy country, are unable to support till now? That's why we have to play in the middle. That's I and my group. We are doing the platform with liberal democracy country and the Burmese movement. we have to engage in the middle to practically able to reach out international society as according to international system, international political system, according to liberal democratic society system. We have to play and change the Burma. It is possible. There is a solution. Why we don't try it? And why not? We start right now. We are calling many scholar activists, many government to work together and change. That is safe for our society, our region, and the whole world if we can change liberal democracy in Burma. Thank you, Professor John. You have any comment? The last word?
It's been a pleasure being with you on this conversation, John.
Thank you, Professor John. See you next time again.
And hopefully we'll talk soon. Minglaba.
Thank you.